How we doing? We're back for another one. No rap today, but I wanted to introduce y'all to some more music. This is Silky Soul by Maze and Frankie Beverly. I'll let y'all listen to this and then we'll get into the episode. Yep. Here we go. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. That is, again, Silky Soul by Maze featuring Frankie Beverly. That is one of my all-time favorites. How are y'all doing? Dude, this is episode 4. This is lucky number 4. Yeah, excited to be here. This last week has kicked my ass, y'all. I don't know if how it's been for y'all, but this last week was pretty rough all around. I feel like lots of social interaction, which I think was very, very good. I think I enjoyed those moments. Very grateful for that. Work has been incredibly stressful, just dealing with new things all the time, and new things aren't necessarily bad, but just a lot to handle. There's a lot of shuffling around going on at my job, lots of things happening kind of all at once. You know, my mom always says it's either feast or famine. There's either abundance or surplus or like nothing at all. And I feel like sometimes that definitely can be true. You can just be coasting along for the ride for a while, and then all of a sudden just shit goes haywire, you know? So yeah, I just kind of want to check in one and see how you guys are. There's this topic for today is a really heavy one, so, you know, trigger warning on like mental health and adverse childhood experiences, aka ACE, suicide, like all of those things. So if you are not mentally or emotionally prepared for that kind of material, then maybe find another episode for now. But I do think this is going to be hopefully beneficial to someone out there. And for myself, I think this is such a broad topic and one that hits very close to home for me. I kind of know, I don't even know how to like get into it, y'all. I don't even know how to get into it because I know that the things that I want to talk about are very personal to me, but I know that the story also affects other people around me, like people, like family and stuff like that. So I was kind of nervous about like talking about I knew I wanted to talk about relationships. Like that I've been, ruminating on that for some weeks now. About like what could I say, and relationships is just such a vast topic, but I think I want to talk about like familial relationships first. And I think that the relationships may be its own series. I may pick back up on it, but I feel like it might be a little mini series, because I do think I want to talk about like millennials and young adults and the postmodern world that we're living in, and social media, and how we relate to one another, how we choose to date, which affects all of us, whether we are heterosexual or queer, somewhere in between, transgender, like all of like that, how we relate to people is incredibly important, marriage, all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of married friends, people younger and older than me. But I think that to even be able to discuss any of that really and truly, you kind of have to start at the beginning. And that's why I kind of mentioned what ACE is, which is adverse childhood experiences. Because I was talking to a friend of mine, well, my little brother, and we were kind of discussing like relationships, like romantic partnerships. But also in that, I was kind of talking about the nuance of how people are raised. And, I think one of the topics that a lot of people kind of talk about now on social media is like, what sibling were you? What number were you? And how that affects in dating. Like, were you the older sibling? Were you the middle child, the youngest child, versus who you're dating? Like, typically the older sibling or the oldest sibling is going to be one who had to grow up quickly, very mature, is kind of a nurturer out of necessity. You know what I'm saying? And can that person date someone who's the youngest child, who's used to getting everything, or vice versa the case? Or like a middle child who's often, overlooked, having to forge their own path, who's kind of like divergent, if you will. And can someone who's divergent be with someone who's the oldest sibling, and typically the oldest sibling goes along with what the status quo is? You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of like nuanced conversations happening. I have talked about like mental health before, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, which we'll circle back to here pretty soon in 2025. But, a lot of you know that my dad committed suicide, and that he was never in the picture. And like that has had huge, obviously, rippling effects on me, and will for the rest of my life. I didn't grow up around any of my dad's family. At my dad's funeral, I realized that I had 10 other siblings at my dad's funeral. I'm like one of the middle kids, damn near, kind of. And yeah, his funeral was the day before my 13th birthday. I just realized recently my dad's an Aries, which I'm like, yeah, this is going to be so morbid, y'all, so I do apologize. I'm like, of course he killed himself. He's a fucking Aries. He's a crash out. He's like the biggest crash out that I know. Like, as a Taurus, I feel like that's crazy to say, but yeah, I mentioned it, in passing, but and on Facebook, because I wanted, I guess, people to know, and to people help my family raise funds for it. But my younger brother unexpectedly passed away last fall, and it also was suicide. So now having a dad and a younger brother who was 27, who have passed from similar circumstances. And yeah, I didn't know like how to like address it and talk about it, because I felt like it all just goes back to like how you're brought up and like nature versus nurture. And I know that is I don't know where we are kind of in the timeline as far as that conversation goes. But I know, like, I feel like when I was coming up in school, like, you know, definitely in science or whatever the case is, there's definitely an area where we kind of talk about nature versus nurture. And I feel like I could be wrong and it could be just common knowledge, but I feel like it really is both, because I think that, well, I know there's studies on like trauma and trauma being passed down and how much information, not just genetically, but like all the things that a person goes through and takes on, like it affects like your DNA and everything. And so then you take these two human beings, male and female, who come together to have a child. You have to really take the fullness and consider who these two human beings are, how they were raised, where they come from, their grandparents, their stories. Like it all kind of matters. And so sometimes I used to think like it's almost like a lose-lose situation, because I feel like it was never nature versus nurture. It's like nature and nurture, because I feel like the genetic information and all of that information is in the DNA, and then boom, the baby comes, and then that is then reinforced. That genetic information is then reinforced by the human beings whose genetics it came from. Does that make sense? Like if I'm getting genetic information from my mom and my dad, and then I happen to be raised by my mom and my dad, it's no longer nature versus nurture. It's both. It's fucking both, right? So I don't know. You can take that how you want to, but y'all, I don't know how to tackle this conversation, because I know that it's so nuanced. I want to be careful. I don't want to like, you know, I guess I just have to tell my story. That's what my little brother told me. He was like, it's not anybody else's corner, it's Kari's corner. So, I mean, I kind of just want to, you know, I guess just maybe spout out a couple of facts here, but talking about ACE, which is adverse childhood experiences, which is, you know, childhood trauma. But this is typically referring to anything in a child's early developmental years, typically before the age of 18. The types of childhood trauma is physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, of course, natural disasters and accidents, and loss of a loved one. And what I find interesting just about that alone, just the types of childhood trauma, is neglect. Neglect alone. It's not like active abuse. It's not direct. It's indirect. But I think that like a person like me, whose father was never there, like not having a parent there is a form of trauma, is a form of, and I hate that I have to use this word because I feel like it's over sensationalized right now. It's such a buzzword in this era. Loss of a loved one, which I've lost like the matriarch of my family pretty early. I just think that's so interesting. Childhood trauma can have lasting and significant effects on a person's life, including mental health problems, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociation. Side effects for physical can be heart disease, obesity, substance abuse, aggression, impulsivity, difficulty with relationships, difficulties learning, attention problems, delays in development, like is language, social, and emotional. Poverty, being poor. Being poor is unfortunately, a form of trauma and can have like an adverse effect. Dysfunctional families, parental substance abuse, again, witnessing violence. This goes so deep, and I kind of don't want to go down a rabbit hole because I do have, like, I guess, a story to tell. Most suicidal diseases, borderline personality disorder, depression, and bipolar disorder, which I do think that my dad had bipolar disorder from the stories that I've heard. Like, I think that he's like a textbook person. I don't know how extreme. Well, I do think it was extreme. Or moderate to extreme. And I think that he was just, well, I know that he was undiagnosed. I just know that he was undiagnosed. Childhood trauma can have long-term impacts on a person's mental, emotional, and physical health. This includes psychological problems, can cause feelings of isolation and fear and distrust, which can cause and lead to low self-esteem and depression, and having trouble forming relationships. And this can also impact cognitive skills and executive functioning, such as working memory, self-control, and cognitive flexibility, which is so good. I don't know. I guess I'm spouting some of this stuff out because I really was so curious, like, how this all plays together. 64% of suicide attempts among adults were attributed to people who had experienced adverse childhood experiences. So over half. And we're talking about, you know, early developmental years, but I mean, we're really saying up until 18, you know? Also, family history of suicide in and of itself is an adverse childhood experience. Having the knowledge of someone close to you who has committed suicide in and of itself is puts you at a higher risk. I know that this also pertains to fucking me as well. But I guess this just leads me into, like, I think that my brother's passing obviously was unexpected for most. And at such a young age, he hadn't even reached 30 yet. And I do think that your mid-20s to late 20s can be very, very hard because so much of the facade is, like, falling from your eyes. I think that you're coming into more of a personal awareness of yourself, who you are, how you have moved through the world. Once you get to, like, 25, 27, you know, like those mid to late 20s, I feel like your eyes have been really opened in a way. Like, you don't necessarily have the same dreams and goals. A lot of those things from your childhood have, like, washed away, and things have probably happened, relationships, maybe kids, family stuff. So, like, your vision of yourself and the world has changed dramatically. Like, if you think from, like, 18 to 28, that decade, those 10 years are crazy. Whether you go to college or not, friends changing, getting out of high school, being in the workforce, being off your parents' insurance, like buying a car payments. I mean, you really are moving into, like, what it means to be, like, an adult and a functioning, self-reliant human being. And then I think that there's, like, an awareness and, like, a reality that sets in because you're inching closer and closer to 30, which seems like such a big number. Now that I'm 30, I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, still got work to do, but I guess, you know, it's a little more underwhelming than I thought it would be. I think I gave, like, 30, like, too much credit in a way. I do think that it allows for you to have a renaissance, if you will, to have a, you know, a rebirth if you allow yourself to do so, which is always available to you at any point. You don't have to wait until a milestone age to do so, to allow yourself the opportunity to do so. But I feel like that is hard. And I feel like I remember being in my late 20s being like, what the fuck am I doing? And where am I going? And I felt so far from the childhood version of myself and the young version of myself, and kind of didn't know like where I was going. And I wish I was inside the mind of my brother, and I wish we were closer to be able to, I wish I could have been of some help, because I feel like to take your own life, like how does one feel? How does one feel? And I'll say this before I even go any further. Shout out to the people who have attempted suicide and are still here. Whether if it was one or multiple times, I'm happy you're still here. And I'm happy that even though in the chaos of the world, like there are people who are actively trying to find the beauty, like desperately, aggressively, violently trying to find happiness and grace and all things that are beautiful about this life, and trying to make it work and make it worth something. And, yeah, so I feel like shout out to y'all, and I know it's not very, I hate stuff. I know it's not very popular to like talk about these things pretty openly, but again, shout out to the people who are still here and who are still fighting, because there are a lot of people who are not, who were successful and who are not. And I feel like a part of me is satisfied in situations like these because I know that was their free will. God gave man free will to exercise as they please, but free will is not without consequence. If I put my hand on a hot stove, I'm going to get burned. Like, we have free will, but it has our choice has consequences, be it good or bad. And so I think there's a peace in absolution of their choice. But I think that the other side of that same coin is how broken, disturbed, frustrated, disassociated, maybe my brother was. And yeah. I don't know, y'all. I thank you for giving me the time, because I really don't know how to get through all of this on my own. I really don't. I feel so like relatable, like relating to my brother, even though we weren't close. We didn't speak. You know what I mean? Like me and most of my dad's other kids, like we're just now, like I feel like we're just now trying. I think that to lose a sibling, like to lose our dad was one thing, and we, a lot of us were, I was 12 and I had, younger siblings, way younger siblings, who probably don't even remember, who don't even remember our dad. Like, they have like pictures and have like faint memories, but they were so young. But I think that going out to California for the services, for the celebration, was like really eye-opening. And yeah, it almost like being in the room, it was cool. But, all of my siblings, like, kind of knew of one another. They whether they grew up in the same household, have a different mom, like, they kind of like have a relationship or had a previous relationship. And it's really apparent, like, when we get on like family Zoom calls and stuff, or when we're in the same spaces, virtually or in person. My mom doing what she had to do in self-preservation, just we moved around a lot. Y'all know my personal story. Y'all know I'm from all over the place. And so, but that meant I didn't grow up around my siblings. You know what I'm saying? So even now, though we're trying, and I've, been friends with my siblings on Facebook for a number of years, the older siblings. I still feel like an outsider, and sometimes that like really is annoying. It's annoying. It's annoying to always feel like an outsider, to feel like an outsider when I moved from California, when I moved to Mississippi, when I moved back to California, when I moved to Florida, to Minnesota. There's a freedom in being in a city where no one knows your name versus being in a place where everybody knows you. You could go to Walmart, you can go to a coffee shop, you can run into somebody. And I know like in the South, there is kind of a comfort in that, like in just being around your people, just around friends and familiar faces, and like the fact that you can run into somebody at a store that you hadn't seen in a while and just chop it up. Like there is a beauty in that, but there also is a prison in that, because you, in a way, like, I don't know, I kind of felt like, and it's so weird, but in a way I felt like I just wasn't free, because you're always, you never know who you're going to run into when you walk out the door. And I kind of feel like sometimes in a city where no one knows your name, and you're kind of like an underdog in a small fish or a medium fish in a big sized pond, there's a freedom there. I can go out and be anybody. Do anything, dress however I want. I'm a fucking nobody. Like I think there is a freedom in that, and I think celebrities talk about that all the time too. Is like when they walk out of the door, their life is not their own. They become this figure, that this image, this idea that is owned and demanded by the general public. And so that's why celebrities like fight so much for like their privacy and to keep their artistry, some who try to keep their artistry from their personal life, because they want some semblance of humanity, if that makes sense. So yeah, I can unpack all that later at a different time. But it was, I think, eye-opening for real for all of us. And to lose one of the younger ones of us, I think it's even more of the dagger. And so I commend my siblings for trying to get together. We've had a few like virtual calls together, for like the holidays and stuff like that. I kind of got the news of my brother's passing, like, as I was preparing to go to Florida. I was just in Florida for a wedding at the beginning of November. And I'm literally sitting in the airport about to get on a plane while my brother is talking to me. One of my older brothers is talking to me about the details and stuff like that. And y'all, it's so sad. Like, it is literally like some of the saddest shit I've ever heard. And just trying to like navigate through that. And I in the room, and it's crazy because you look at his smile, and I look at like the smile of some of my siblings, and it's so bright. It's so bright. They have such a beautiful smile. And I could tell it lights up a room. Even my older brother, one of my older brothers, he actually is so handsome, and he has such a bright, it can light up a room. But that dude fucking hates me. And I think it's hilarious and sad. But that dude does not fucking speak to me. He does not look at me. He does not, when we're on Zoom calls, he does not acknowledge me. He does not acknowledge me when we're in person. And I think that it's a little infuriating to me that we can be in the wake of our brother's passing, who he feels like he has the right to, that this is his family. These are my people. These are, I grew up with these folks. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like there's a bit of ownership that he has, being one of the older males, in the family or whatever. But I think it's like wild that for you, like, it's ironic because I actually looked him up on Facebook. I probably sent that man a Facebook request probably when I was still in high school. Like, probably like found him on Facebook when I was in high school. That man to this day, like to this day, has never accepted that friend request on Facebook. If I pull up Facebook right now, it's still a pending friend request. Didn't even have the balls enough to reject it. But yeah, when I was there and I saw him walk in the hallway, I spoke to him and I was like, dude, it's really good to see you. It's really good to see you again. And he kind of like looked at me, like he kind of embraced me, but he looked me up and down, and I think he realized who I was. And he was like, oh, what's up? And then like kept walking. You know what I'm saying? Which I thought was interesting. And I got up to speak. I said a couple of words. Just I did not feel like almost it was my place to, because again, with my family, my dad's side, I feel like such an outsider. So I in a way, I almost don't feel like I have the right to get up and speak, especially in a moment like that. And I have a sister who, even at my dad's funeral was when obviously I met all of my siblings, you know, right before my 13th birthday. And one of my sisters, who is technically not biologically my sister, but I think the world of her, and I think that she is the best of us. And even at the funeral all those years ago, she was so intentional, even then as a young teenager, about meeting a new sibling. Oh, this is our brother. Like it is what it is. We don't even know who this nigga is, but you know, like he is our own. And sister, if you're listening to this, I love you so much. She has never allowed the fact of the circumstances of our parents and the sins of our parents to get in the way of us having a relationship and bringing me into the fold. And I am ever grateful that she has always had that approach, because I don't have, all of my siblings are not like that. Again, everyone has free will. I don't know why my older brother is like that with me. And there was even a point where I was kind of like calling after him in the hallway, because a bunch of us were in the hallway kind of chopping it up after kind of, you know, everyone's just kind of hanging out and having a good time. The DJ's playing music and stuff. And he doesn't come to me. Like he kind of acknowledges me, but he's like, yeah, hold on. But then like purposefully walks away. So I walk toward him, you know what I'm saying? And I done had just enough tequila in me that I could act a fool. But I know that that's not the right thing to do, especially at like my brother's celebration of life. Like I can't go in there and act a donkey. But you know, sometimes I feel like people get pushed and they get pushed and they get pushed. And even being in the juxtaposition of being around people that I'm actually closely related to by blood, DNA, genetics, going back to the beginning of the episode, but yet still feel like a goddamn outsider, like literally keeping a wall, you know? And even in me saying all this, and even in me being frustrated in the moment, I can still see that you have the potential to be a light. I see how people react to you. I see how people acknowledge you, you know? I see how people engage with him. And I know that when he decides to open himself up to whoever, it's incredible. It's like blinding light almost. You know what I'm saying? But it's that same duality that I think that my dad had is the same duality that everyone has. But that same kind of extreme dichotomy is something that he also possesses as well. Now, whatever his reasoning is for like not engaging with me or wanting to engage with me is his own prerogative. But I feel like even in the moment after, I mean, years, my dad passed in like 07, 06, 07, something like that, you know? And now here we are almost 20 years later, you know what I'm saying? Almost. But even me trying to put my good foot forward, and to still be like in the face of rejection, for me to still be in the face of rejection, even in this highly emotional, sensitive time that we're all in, being at my brother's celebration of life, you know. But I went up to him, you know, he was with his partner, and she's getting the kids ready, and he's down there kind of talking to the kids. And so this is after I was calling to him, and he kind of ignored me. So so when he walked into the room or walked back into the big space, I walked into, and of course everyone's having a good time. Every kid's running around, eating, drinking, all that kind of stuff. Bar open, music going. So, I politely wait. Because again, I had called after him. I'm trying to have a conversation with him that he refuses to have. Again, he refuses to kind of acknowledge my existence. And so I sit there and wait for about 2 or 3 minutes while he's getting the baby carriage together and all this other kind of stuff. But he's doing this, and he sees me standing next to him, but again, refuses to acknowledge me. And so I leaned down. I was like, I don't know what chip you have on your shoulder, but I said, but whenever you're ready to actually have a conversation, I'll be here. Because then fast forward, now my siblings are having like group Zoom calls for the holidays, for Christmas, for New Year, for Thanksgiving, like for all of this stuff. But then there's a stark difference when it's all of us, sans, that means without, sans my brother, that particular brother, versus when he's on the call. He very much likes to take control, and everyone's chopping it up with him. But no one, to my knowledge, I have made it very aware the dynamic that he and I have to my other siblings. Because one, again, I'm an outsider and kind of looking for like advice on how to, like what steps I should take and how I should act and like give me some P's and Q's on how to move in this arena. Because again, even though I'm with family, I'm completely out of my depth. And so they are aware of the dynamic, but I feel like I don't have anyone advocating for me in this, because I feel like it's like abuse. Like, again, neglect is a form of abuse. You know what I'm saying? Granted, he's not my parent, but you're like an older sibling. Like, you should be someone that I should look up to, that should be like one of my older sisters who has welcomed me into the fold, and I think the ironic thing is, like, one of my older brothers treats me like shit. Great. Goes out of his way to actively ignore me. Great. If I have a 18-year-old sister and like a 20-year-old brother. I have younger siblings, right? I feel like if my older siblings, caught wind of me treating my 20-year-old and 18-year-old younger siblings how my older brother treats me, they would hang me upside down. I don't think that I would have the same grace from my siblings if I treated my younger siblings the way my older brother treats me. And if that be the case, then why is he allowed, if y'all call me brother and engage with me and accept me, then why do you guys allow that piss poor behavior? Because the only way I can really defend myself, I feel like, is if I act a fucking fool. It's either I act a fool or I just pay it. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's usually what I do. I feel like that's the only way I can do that, because whenever we're together, virtually or in person, it's for familial things. And I feel like familial things necessarily aren't always the time to act a fucking donkey. Now, will I do it? Absolutely. And I really don't mind shaking this shit up. I'll tear all this shit up. I'll move all this shit over. I really don't care. But I know that being a crash out is not always the best option. But I don't care who I make feel uncomfortable, because y'all have already made me feel uncomfortable. I already feel uncomfortable. I'm already dissatisfied. Does that make sense, y'all? Does that make sense? I don't know. It's such a nuanced conversation, and I know that my dad was physically abusive. He was physically abusive to my mother. I know that he was physically abusive to my siblings' moms. I've heard stories. From my own mother. Emotionally abusive. When I had asked my sister I have multiple sisters, but when I asked my sister the story of my dad's passing, because I know he committed suicide, but I didn't know the story. I didn't know what happened, right? And the first thing, we sat on the phone for hours. Like we both cried. I commended her bravery and her strength to be able to tell the story. And it was so vivid. It was so vivid. It's like I was there. Her telling the story is almost as if I was there. I could see it. I could see it in my mind's eye. But, I asked her, to just really just share what she could say. And the first thing she said was, she was like, have you ever read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? She was like, yeah. She was like, that was our father. That was our dad. Completely two different people. A monster to some and a saint to many others. And I have other people in my family, other like cousins who are like a little bit older than me. But I've reached out to them and talked to them about my dad, and they have nothing bad to say. This man is an abuser. This man is an emotional and physical abuser, drug addict, whatever. But then, like, I talked to cousins, and some of them thought that he was like the coolest. They thought he was the coolest. They thought that he was a good dude, like he showed up for them, or if their dad wasn't there, or if they didn't have like a male figure around, like, no, your dad helped me get my shit for prom, like blah, 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 blah. When I didn't have XYZ, your dad was really there. And I said, well, that's not the story I want to hear. Love that, but I'm trying to get to the real shit. And so then, of course, I talked to my siblings, the children of our mothers who were with this man. And then you get a completely different story. And every time I find out something new, it's worse. It's worse. It's worse. It's worse. It gets worse. It's so sad. And so I guess then you take all of that into account and then take the mental and emotional health of all of my siblings, which I feel like, no shade, is all fucked up. I feel like I'm doing okay for myself. I could be so much further, and that just is what it is, and I can deal with myself on a day-to-day basis. But how much better off could we all be had we had a different situation, different circumstance, a different father? But of course, you can say shoulda, coulda, woulda, and it's all semantics, because it doesn't fucking matter, because it's all fucking made up, because that's not the story. That's not how it all came to be. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of these conversations have to be rooted in reality and in fact in what did and did not happen, which is why I think so many kids get frustrated when they get older and they start holding their parents accountable for the things they did and did not do. And the parents are so unaware. They're so unaware, or they have a completely different ideology of how they raise their kids, or don't want to acknowledge the things they did and did not do. And then the kids are like, no, that actually did happen. Or that, no, that actually did not happen. And then the parents wonder, which I think that this is not completely true, but they wonder why they have such skewed and unhealthy relationship dynamics with their children. It's because your version of what happened is not rooted in reality. The things that you said and you did and the things you did not do when you were and were not there, like that all has an effect. And I think that my dad's passing made me realize just how much influence a person can have. And I'm so much like my father, I never even fucking met the man. Just hearing like some of the things that he liked, he didn't like, or like his personality. Like there's a lot of things I have from him that are really crazy. And I've never even fucking met the man. The first time I was in the same room with this fucker was at his funeral. You know what I mean? But then you can even a person who is so twisted, all contradicted, can still have such a great influence and a great impact. Again, going back to nature versus nurture. Wasn't nurtured by him, but still had his nature via DNA. Y'all, this shit is so wild. I hope y'all are still with me. For those of you who are with me right now, I thank you. I thank you. I really tried to come up with a structure for this episode, but I really didn't know how to break this topic down. And I guess this can be like a little mini series on relationships. But I do think that it all starts at the source, and it starts at the parents and the household in which they were raised and those dynamics, because that ripples into how those adverse childhood experiences affect you as an adult. Does that make sense? Again, I read this earlier, but childhood trauma can have long-term impacts on a person's mental health, emotional health, and physical health. Can cause feelings of isolation, fear, and distrust, can lead to low self-esteem, depression, trouble forming relationships, can also impact cognitive skills and executive functioning, such as working memory, self-control, and cognitive flexibility. I feel like that alone is crazy. A lack of self-control and proper memory, working memory, the elasticity of your brain, cognitive flexibility. Trauma can increase the risk of chronic physical conditions such as asthma, heart disease, cancer, obesity, and chronic pain. It can also impact the body's stress response system, which can lead to a compromised immune system and poor cardiovascular health. Trauma can lead to risky behavior such as substance abuse, smoking, an unhealthy diet, and exercise habits. Can also cause difficulty maintaining routines, accomplishing daily tasks, and performing well at school or at work. Trauma can cause people to over-respond or under-respond to sensory stimuli. For example, they may be hypersensitive to sound, smells, touch, or light, or they may be unaware of pain, touch, or internal physical sensations. Y'all, that's scary. That to me is scary. And then that brings me into why I hate to be an nihilist, but why I think that like having kids is like the greatest responsibility a person can ever have. And I think that people are having kids so frivolously these days. I'm not going up for like abortion. I mean, sure, women's rights. Duh. There's no federal laws that have mandates over a man's body. Let's just say that. But I think that if all of that can happen from childhood trauma, and that was just about the lasting long-term effects of childhood trauma, of adverse childhood experiences, that human being who dealt with all that shit has to go out into the world and be a functioning human being at work at a job, be in relationships and shit like that. Does that make sense? Like, how does that person move through the world, and then that person procreates with another person, gets with another person, and they have kids? No offense, but I often wonder, my older brother who literally refuses to acknowledge me, what the fuck are you teaching your sons? I hate to be that ugly. I hate to be that blunt. But what kind of children are you raising when in the wake of absolute despair and distress, frustration, confusion, and absolute sorrow, you can still be selfish enough to not open up your heart, mind, whatever, to a person who is also another victim of circumstance by our parents and our fucking dad? Like, what beef do you actually have against me? And I know that. I know that his issues aren't whatever it is that's eating away at him, that's chewing at him, ain't got shit to do with me. But yet I become a beneficiary of those experiences, of his lived adverse childhood experiences, if that makes sense. And then we pass this along to kids, and then we raise kids in this fucked up world. I don't think, maybe the answer is not just stop having kids because the world's fucked up. I know there are people out there who are desperately trying to have kids, who desperately want to have kids, who desperately want to be parents. But at what cost and to what end? Does that make sense? And maybe there's a little bit of immaturity on my side to even say that out loud. But I think that if those impacts that I just read, those long-term impacts, can live within a person for the rest of their fucking life, do we not need to take more caution and concern and care before we lie down and fuck and possibly bring a kid into this world? Hello? What's not clicking? Does that make sense? Whew. Okay, how we feeling, y'all? How we feeling? This is the longest episode so far. We're almost at a fucking hour, y'all. We're almost at a fucking hour. Does this make sense? Okay, okay. Okay, I hear you. I'm just assuming that I'm hearing your response back to me, guys. I know I can't hear you, but this isn't supposed to be an engaging conversation. This is supposed to be an engaging conversation. I don't know. I want to be well, and I feel like that's part of the reason why I'm not dating right now and have not really actively been dating, because I have so much shit to work through. Mind you, all of this mental and emotional shit that I carry around and trying to heal for the sake of my nieces and nephews, my siblings all growing up in their own little world or their own little bubble. Then all these first cousins are around each other. All these kids, these babies are around their aunts and uncles that don't even know who they are. They don't even know who their family is. I met so many of my little nieces and nephews for the first time, and and they're so beautiful, and they're kids, and I'm like, I pray that we're getting it right. Not even for ourselves now, but for the next generation. We took a picture of all of, my dad's name is Edmund, so all of Edmund's kids and grands, right? There were so many fucking kids in that picture, it didn't make any sense. Everybody's just fucking. Everybody fucking. Hate to say it like that, y'all. I hate to be so abrasive, but what are we to leave behind for the next generation? I hate to make it sound so big, but what are we going to leave behind for our kids, our nieces, our nephews, our godchildren? What is a legacy that we leave behind? Again, this is more nuanced than. Sorry, y'all, give me a second. This is such a nuanced conversation, and I don't have it all, and I'm hoping that I can maybe bring some people on and talk to some people who can help with these conversations, because it's a lot. And again, I think that we always have to go back before we start going forward. We have to go back to the beginning. Before we try to tackle the thing as a whole. Y'all, I thank you, and I appreciate you. I really do. I really appreciate you. And let's lighten the load a little bit. You know what I mean? We got through it. We got through it, y'all. Whew. Exhale with me. Breathe in. Breathe out. Y'all, this is Whitney Houston. This is For the Love of You, a classic song. That I love so much. Thank y'all so much. I felt like I was getting so deep in there. I had to hop out. I had to hop out. I'm trying to get myself out. trying to get back to myself. But thank y'all for allowing me the space and the time and giving me a chance to express and tell my story. There's so much more I could say clearly, but I feel like I stopped at a good place. So breathe with me a little bit. We can rock out to some Whitney Houston. Y'all know I love her. The anniversary of her passing was just on the 11th of this month. So here we go. Man, I pray y'all are well. How y'all feeling? Y'all okay? I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you so much. I just want us to get it right, y'all. I can't say that enough. Man, make sure y'all love on somebody. Do the right thing when you can. Build up some good karma. It doesn't take anything to be a good human being. It's actually free. And gives you so many benefits, dividends. Just pay all that love forward. If you haven't gotten it, it's okay. You haven't gotten the peace, it's okay. You haven't been given what you needed, it's okay. You can still be that for somebody else. Should you so choose, you can be that light for somebody else. And I promise God honors that. There's a verse in the book of Hebrews that talks about God is not so unjust to forget that all that you've done for his children and then ministering and then still ministering to the saints. God is not so unjust to forget all the good that you have done for all the people around you, for all of his children, all of his sons and daughters. You extending grace and mercy and love to the people around you. God does not forget that. You may have, but God doesn't forget that. God does not forget that. So it counts for something, y'all. It counts for something. And the thing is, you may do good to somebody and they may not do good back to you, but I promise you get that back. It's just a law of nature. The good that you put out, you will receive. It may not come from the person that you want it to come from, but you will get it back. I love y'all. I'm going to let it ride out. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.